The galaxy knows the Sith as villains draped in black robes, wielding crimson lightsabers and commanding vast armies. We know their most famous names: Darth Vader, Darth Sidious, Darth Maul. But beneath the surface of these legendary figures lies a vast ocean of secrets, a hidden world of knowledge that even dedicated fans have rarely encountered. These are the facts that slip through the cracks of history, the details too obscure for the casual observer, the truths buried in ancient tombs and forgotten holocrons. Tonight, we journey into those shadows, not to the well-trodden ground of the Skywalker saga or the Clone Wars, but to the strange corners of Sith lore where few have ventured. We'll explore the biological mysteries of the original Sith species, the corrupting power of their ancient language, and the horrifying techniques of Sith alchemy that twisted life itself. These are stories that exist in the margins, whispered in the depths of Korriban's tombs and inscribed in texts that most would fear to read. So settle in. Let the soft glow of holocrons guide you into sleep as we uncover the Sith facts you've never heard before. The crimson-skinned ancestors, long before the Sith were an order of dark side force users, before they were a philosophy or a threat to the galaxy, the Sith were a species, a race of beings whose very biology seemed tailored for the darkness they would come to embody. These were not humans who fell to corruption, but an entirely separate people with their own culture, their own physiology, and their own connection to the Force that predated any Jedi teachings. The Sith species originated on Korriban, a desolate world in the Stygian caldera that would later be known by another name, Moraband. This planet's harsh red landscape seemed to mirror the beings who called it home. The native Sith were humanoids, yes, but marked by distinctive features that set them apart from nearly every other sentient species in the galaxy. Their skin came in shades of crimson, deep red that ranged from bright scarlet to darker, blood-like hues. Some Sith displayed skin tones that tended toward orange or even violet, though red remained the dominant coloration. Interestingly, infant Sith were born with lighter pinkish red skin that would darken as they matured into adulthood, their complexion deepening until it reached that characteristic, intimidating crimson. This color wasn't merely aesthetic. Researchers have speculated that these skin tones evolved as a form of passive camouflage against the reddish landscapes of Korriban, helping ancient Sith blend into their environment when hunting or hiding from predators. But the skin color was just the beginning of their unique physiology. The Sith possessed sharp predatory features that gave them an almost feral appearance. Bone spurs protruded from various points on their bodies, most notably at the elbows, but also appearing along their jaws, chins, and other locations. These weren't fragile or decorative. They were genuine bone structures, hard and capable of being used defensively in close combat situations. Their faces displayed a remarkable pair of cheek tendrils, fleshy appendages that hung down from their high cheekbones. These tentacles weren't simply present, they were expressive, serving as a form of nonverbal communication unique to the Sith species. A slight curl of the tendrils could indicate a rejuvenated, positive attitude. Stroking the right tendril was an expression of thoughtfulness, a gesture of contemplation. Quivering tendrils signaled anger, while raising them in conjunction with their eyebrow stalks could form a questioning expression. This sophisticated system of nonverbal communication allowed Sith to convey complex emotions and reactions without speaking a word. Above their glowing yellow eyes, which possessed an almost predatory gleam, the Sith had cartilaginous eyebrow stalks. These weren't merely aesthetic features, but functional structures that protected and enhanced their vision. Combined with their pointed teeth and simian mouths below small noses, the Sith presented a formidable, almost frightening appearance to outsiders. Perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of Sith physiology was their handedness. The vast majority of the Sith species were left-handed, an unusual trait that had no clear evolutionary explanation. For the first 1,000 years of their existence, the Sith had no contact with other humanoid species. So being left-handed wasn't seen as unusual from their perspective. It was simply how their people were. This left-handed dominance influenced their culture and their weaponry. The Lan Varrock, a signature Sith weapon that predated lightsabers, was designed exclusively for left-handed use, making it nearly useless to right-handed opponents who might try to wield it. The standard Sith hand and foot possessed 3 clawed digits, a tridactyl structure that provided excellent grip and formidable natural weapons. However, as we'll discuss later, this feature would change dramatically after the arrival of human Dark Jedi exiles. Some exceptional Sith, like Seknos Wrath, displayed 5 digits even in the pure-blooded era, suggesting some natural variation within the species. The Sith possessed cranial horns, another distinctive feature that varied in size and prominence between individuals. These horns served both as natural weapons and as displays of genetic prowess within Sith society. Combined with their bone spurs, tentacles, and predatory features, the Sith presented an appearance that could be genuinely intimidating to outsiders encountering them for the first time. But beyond their physical appearance, the Sith possessed something far more significant: a genetic predisposition toward the dark side of the Force. This wasn't cultural or learned behavior. The Sith species had an innate biological connection to the dark side that made them naturally Force-sensitive at a rate approaching 100%. For species where Force sensitivity might occur in 1 out of thousands or millions of individuals, the Sith stood apart. Nearly every member of their species could touch the Force, and when they did, they naturally gravitated toward its darker aspects. This connection manifested before any formal training. Young Sith children would display Force abilities instinctively, often channeling emotions like anger or fear into bursts of power. Their society evolved around this reality, developing rituals and practices to harness these abilities long before the Dark Jedi arrived to formalize Sith teachings. The Sith weren't simply physiologically distinct. Their bodies operated slightly differently from baseline humans in several key ways. Adult Sith maintained a higher body temperature than humans, typically ranging from 38 to 39 degrees Celsius, compared to the human standard of 36.5 to 37.5. This made them feel noticeably warm to the touch of human companions, earning them the nickname hot-blooded among some who encountered them. This elevated temperature came with trade-offs. The Sith had evolved on Korriban's relatively cold desert climate, and their bodies reflected this adaptation. Their skin contained approximately 1/3 to 1/2 fewer sweat glands than human skin. This made them excellent at tolerating cold temperatures, but far more susceptible to overheating in warm or humid environments. Sith genuinely disliked heat and humidity, and later Sith warriors would ensure their armor included temperature control devices to prevent dangerous overheating during prolonged combat or exposure to warm climates. Their internal biology showed some interesting variations as well. Sith kidneys were lobed rather than smooth, though this appeared to be a vestigial feature from earlier evolutionary stages that provided no functional advantage. Their immune systems were remarkably resilient and effective, operating through both innate and adaptive responses that made them resistant to many diseases and infections that might fell members of other species. The Sith organized themselves into a rigid caste system that had existed for approximately 100,000 years before the arrival of the human Dark Jedi exiles. This wasn't a recent social development, but an ancient structure embedded so deeply in Sith culture that each caste was sometimes referred to as a subspecies in its own right. At the bottom were the Grothu, the slave caste, who performed manual labor and were considered little more than property. Above them stood the agricultural caste, the Zuguruk, who worked the land and produced food for the empire. The military and warrior caste were known as the Masasi, formidable fighters bred and trained for combat from childhood. These warriors would later become famous when Naga Sado took a contingent of them into exile after the Great Hyperspace War, where they built the temples on Yavin 4 that the Rebel Alliance would later use as a base. The intellectual and religious caste were the Kisai, priests and scholars who preserved knowledge and performed rituals. They studied the Force, which they understood as magic rather than the scientific phenomenon the Jedi would later describe. The Kisai recorded information in scrolls, tomes, and tablets documenting dark side powers, alchemical processes, and the construction of weapons and artifacts. However, many of these ancient writings were imbued with the madness of their creators, capable of driving unprepared readers to insanity merely by studying them. At the pinnacle of Sith society stood the ruling caste, those who had proven themselves through strength, cunning, and mastery of the Force. These individuals commanded territories, armies, and absolute authority over those beneath them. Civil war between different Sith nations was common, a constant state of conflict that honed their warrior culture and ensured that only the strongest survived to lead. Among all the curious customs of the Sith species, one particularly stands out: their consumption of blood soup. Some historians have speculated that this practice might indicate interaction between the ancient Sith and the Anzati, a vampiric species that fed on the soup or life essence of other beings. The Anzati themselves claim to remember the very first Sith, suggesting contact in the distant past, though no concrete evidence beyond these claims has ever been discovered. The Sith recorded their knowledge not in the electronic databases that later civilizations would use, but in scrolls, tomes, and tablets. These weren't simple documents, but complex repositories of dark knowledge. Writings describing dark side powers, alchemical formulas, weapon construction techniques, and philosophies on domination and destruction filled these ancient texts. The knowledge they contained was dangerous, not just because of what it could teach, but because the process of writing them had infused the documents themselves with dark side energy and the madness of their creators. Reading these texts without proper mental preparation could lead to insanity. The madness embedded in the writings would seep into unprepared minds, warping thoughts and fragmenting consciousness. This wasn't metaphorical. The dark side energy, literally contained within the ink and parchment, could corrupt those who study them, making the pursuit of ancient Sith knowledge a genuinely hazardous undertaking, even for those already strong in the dark side. When human dark Jedi exiles arrived on Korriban around 6,900 years before the Battle of Yavin, they discovered this sophisticated culture already in place. These fallen Jedi, fleeing defeat in the 100-year darkness, used their Force powers to present themselves as gods to the native Sith people. The primitive Sith, who understood the Force only as magic, worshipped these newcomers with their advanced powers and knowledge. Over time, the human dark Jedi began intermarrying with the Sith species. This wasn't merely cultural integration, but deliberate genetic engineering and selective breeding. The dark Jedi saw value in the Sith's natural dark side connection and sought to combine it with their own Force knowledge. The process was gradual, taking place over nearly 2 millennia, but it fundamentally altered both groups. Superstition, blind loyalty, and sympathy were actively bred out of the population. Cunning, ambition, and affinity for the Force were selected for and amplified. The resultant hybrid race combined the best attributes of both parent species. The Sith's natural dark side connection and intimidating appearance with the dark Jedi's refined Force techniques and strategic thinking. By the time of the Great Hyperspace War, around 5,000 years before Yavin, most Sith in the Empire displayed predominantly Sith traits, though with variations. Most had evolved from 3 digits to 4, a clear sign of human genetic influence. Notable figures like Ludo Kresh and Marka Ragnos were identified as half-breeds, displaying characteristics of both species. Others, like Naga Sadow, had purer Jedi lineage and minimal Sith blood, showing distinct human features including 5 digits on their hands and feet, absence of bone spurs and eyebrow stalks, yet retaining some Sith traits like cheek tendrils and red skin. The term Sith pureblood emerged to describe individuals who possessed a higher than average concentration of original Sith species blood. These individuals were marked by their red skin, though even calling them purebloods was technically a misnomer, since all post-exile Sith were hybrids to some degree. Nevertheless, having visible Sith blood became a mark of pride, a claimed genetic superiority within the Empire's ruling class. By 44 ABY, it was widely believed that the true Sith species had become extinct due to extensive interbreeding. The characteristics that remained were diluted remnants of their once pure bloodline. However, some theories suggest that isolated populations may have survived, hidden in the unknown regions or on forgotten worlds, where they maintained their pure genetic heritage away from the mixing that occurred in the main Sith Empire. The legacy of the Sith species persisted far beyond their apparent extinction. Their genetic predisposition to the dark side influenced the Sith Order for millennia. Their physical traits became symbols of power and authority. Their cultural practices, from the caste system to the embrace of conflict as a means of advancement, shaped Sith philosophy long after the original species had faded from the galaxy. Even individuals who appeared to have no Sith ancestry sometimes displayed characteristics of the species. Iskat Akaris, an Imperial Inquisitor described in recent accounts, possessed distinctive red skin and hooked, extended fingers. Though she lacked some traditional Sith features like the full facial tentacles, her physiognomy corresponded remarkably well with descriptions of ancient Sith. Throughout her life, she showed a natural attraction to ancient Sith artifacts and homeworlds, suggesting a genetic link to the species operating on an instinctual level. The Picori, Iskat's supposed species, had their existence carefully wiped from the Jedi archives. The most reasonable explanation is that the Picori were an evolutionary offshoot of the Sith race, their existence concealed by the Jedi to prevent knowledge of surviving Sith bloodlines from spreading. If true, this would mean that pure Sith genetics persisted into the Imperial era and beyond, hidden under different species names and protected by layers of secrecy. The biological reality of the Sith species shaped not just their own culture, but the entire philosophy and practice of the Sith Order that followed. Their natural connection to the dark side made them ideal vessels for the teachings the Dark Jedi brought. Their predatory appearance reinforced the intimidation and fear that became hallmarks of Sith tactics. Their caste system influenced the hierarchical structure the Sith would maintain throughout their history. Understanding the Sith species is crucial to understanding the Sith Order itself. These weren't humans who fell to darkness. They were beings for whom darkness was natural, biological, and inevitable. The Dark Jedi didn't corrupt an innocent species. They found a people already attuned to the Force's darker aspects and gave them the knowledge to refine and amplify what was already present. The power of forbidden words. Language shapes reality. Words carry weight, meaning, and in the case of the Sith, actual corrupting power embedded in their very pronunciation. The ancient language of the Sith, known as Ur-Kitat, or the Old Tongue, wasn't merely a means of communication. It was a weapon, a tool of dark side mastery, and a repository of forbidden knowledge that could literally corrupt those who attempted to learn it. The Sith language originated with the native Sith species on the worlds of Zeost and Korriban. In its purest form, the language was called Tsisoya Tut, though this true name is rarely used even in scholarly circles. This was the tongue spoken before the arrival of the Dark Jedi exiles, a language that had evolved over tens of thousands of years in complete isolation from the rest of the galaxy. When the Dark Jedi arrived, they were predominantly speakers of Galactic Basic Standard, and they interpreted Sith phonetics through the lens of their own native tongue. The Sith species, worshipping these powerful newcomers as gods, followed their lead in pronunciation and usage. This created a fascinating linguistic evolution, where the original Sith language began incorporating basic influences, transforming into something hybrid, yet maintaining its essential dark character. The structure of the Sith language reveals much about the culture that created it. Sith was an agglutinative language, meaning words or even entire phrases were constructed from linear sequences of distinct, meaningful units. These morphemes, the smallest meaningful units in the grammar, were often made of closed syllables that ended with consonants. This gave the language a brisk, choppy sound that conveyed authority and force. Every word in the Sith language was stressed on the first syllable without exception. This regular emphasis pattern created a rhythm that made the language sound commanding and declarative. There was no room for the soft, flowing sounds that characterized many other languages. Sith speech was harsh, direct, and powerful in its very pronunciation. The language actively discouraged vowels in hiatus, meaning two vowel sounds appearing next to each other. When this situation arose, glides like the consonants J or the lateral approximant were inserted to separate them. For example, the phrase meaning about a demon was Sik Sayan Jat, constructed from Siksa, meaning demon, and Anjat, an ablative noun marker, with the glide Y inserted to eliminate the awkward vowel combination. Perhaps most intriguingly, the phonetic inventory of the Sith language deliberately excluded certain sounds that were common in basics. According to linguistic analyses, proper Sith possessed no sounds corresponding to the basic letters E, P, or F. This created interesting challenges when translating names or concepts from other languages into Sith. Creative scribes would translate names based on etymology rather than phonetics, transforming the meaning rather than simply transcribing the sounds. This limitation led to a curious problem. Even the name Korriban, the Sith homeworld, could not be properly written using the Sith phonetic system due to the lack of the B sound. Words like Darafon or names like Darth Krait's original surname Kresh presented similar difficulties. These inconsistencies suggest that either the phonetic rules had exceptions or that the language evolved differently in various regions and time periods. The Sith developed multiple writing systems to serve different purposes. The original writing system consisted of complex hieroglyphics that required extensive training to master. Over centuries, Sith scribes sought to develop less complicated alternatives, leading to the creation of distinct scripts for different uses. Common Sith emerged as a simplified writing system used for everyday mundane communication. This was the script that average Sith citizens would learn for basic literacy, suitable for record-keeping, simple messages, and practical documentation. High Sith served ecclesiastical purposes, reserved for religious texts, formal ceremonies, and important official documents. This more elaborate script maintained closer ties to the original hieroglyphic system and required deeper study to master. The Massassi warriors who followed Naga Sadow into exile on Yavin 4 developed their own simplified version of High Sith, creating a hieroglyphic system adapted to their needs. A third system, known as Kitat, consisted of 37 distinct runes particularly suitable for incantation scrolls. This script was designed specifically for recording Sith magic and dark side rituals. The runes could be carved into stone, etched into metal, or painted with special inks on parchment. The choice of medium often depended on the ritual's purpose and permanence. Not all Sith mastered the runic forms of their language. Those who struggled with the traditional scripts developed a workaround, transcribing the Sith alphabet into reflected Aurebesh characters, the standard galactic script that could only be read backwards. This created encoded messages that appeared as gibberish to casual observers, but revealed their Sith content when viewed in a mirror or read right to left. The physical act of writing in Sith was significant. When Sith runes were carved into temple walls, obelisks, or tombstones, they weren't merely decorative. The inscriptions themselves carried dark side energy, emanating a tangible presence that Force sensitives could feel when approaching them. The Sith Citadel on Exegol, the Sith Temple on Malachor, Darth Bane's tomb, and the Lothal Jedi Temple all bore such inscriptions, their very presence serving as wards, warnings, or channels for dark side power. But the true power of the Sith language extended far beyond its written forms. The language itself was imbued with dark side energy, a reality that set it apart from nearly every other known tongue in the galaxy. Learning to speak Orkitat wasn't just an academic exercise, it was a form of dark side training that could corrupt even those with good intentions. This corrupting influence was well documented in historical records. The Jedi historian Atris assembled a collection of Sith holocrons for study, and the language used within those devices gradually drew her toward the dark side despite her initial intentions. The act of repeatedly hearing and attempting to understand Sith words, even through the filter of holocron recordings, eroded her connection to the light side and opened her to darker impulses. The power of the language lay partly in its precision and partly in its inherent dark resonance. As Emperor Palpatine later explained, a simple change in inflection could alter a Sith prophecy completely, opening ancient doctrines to multiple interpretations. The most sacred prophecies studied by the Sith Eternal were transcribed in Ur-Kittat specifically because the language's complexity made it resistant to simple understanding. Like the dark side itself, Ur-Kittat required mastery to decipher properly. This property made the Sith language simultaneously a protection and a tool. Knowledge recorded in Sith could not be easily accessed by outsiders, ensuring that dark side secrets remained in the hands of those trained to use them. But it also meant that Sith teachings could be reinterpreted across generations, each group of Darksiders finding slightly different meanings in the same ancient texts based on subtle pronunciation differences or contextual understanding. The Galactic Republic recognized the danger posed by this language. In an attempt to bury its deep truths and prevent the spread of Sith knowledge, the Republic officially banned the language of the Sith. Protocol droids like C-3PO were specifically programmed with restrictions preventing them from translating Ur-Kittat, a safeguard intended to keep casual researchers from accidentally exposing themselves to corrupting knowledge. But like the Sith Order itself, the old tongue refused to be erased. It survived in ancient Sith holocrons carved into temple walls and in the whispers passed from Sith master to apprentice. The language lived on through the generations, a secret code that marked initiated Darksiders and separated them from the ignorant Jedi who couldn't even read the warnings inscribed on the tombs they occasionally explored. Darth Sidious and Darth Vader both achieved fluency in Ur-Kittat, allowing them to access ancient Sith texts directly without requiring translation. This gave them advantages over Force users who relied on basic translations of Sith documents, as nuances and layers of meaning were inevitably lost in translation. The ability to read and speak the Old Tongue became a mark of true Sith scholarship, separating dilettantes from serious students of the dark side. The language's structure itself reinforced Sith philosophy. The agglutinative nature meant that complex concepts could be expressed through combinations of simpler roots, creating an economical yet precise system. The harsh, consonant-heavy phonetics matched the brutal, direct nature of Sith culture. The mandatory first-syllable stress created an authoritative sound that brooked no argument or debate. Certain Sith phrases and words gained power through repeated use in dark side rituals. When multiple Sith spoke the same incantation simultaneously, their voices resonating with dark side energy, the combined effect could achieve extraordinary results. These ritual phrases were recorded on incantation scrolls written in the Kitat script, their exact pronunciation crucial to achieving the desired effect. The language preserved knowledge that the Jedi had deliberately tried to destroy or forget. Techniques like essence transfer, the creation of Sith holocrons, and the precise methods for conducting certain dark side rituals were all encoded in texts written in Ur-Kitat. Without understanding the language, these techniques remained inaccessible, a safety mechanism that ensured only committed students of darkness could learn them. As the Sith Order evolved, so did the language. New words were created to describe Force techniques developed by later Sith Lords. Terminology around lightsaber combat forms, specific dark side powers, and philosophical concepts expanded the vocabulary beyond what the original Sith species had needed. By the time of the Galactic Empire, Ur-Kitat had become a sophisticated language capable of expressing complex ideas about the Force, technology, and galactic politics. The Sith Eternal, Palpatine's cultists on Exegol, maintained Ur-Kitat as their primary language for sacred purposes. They believed that speaking in the old tongue during rituals increased their connection to the ancient Sith and amplified the power they could channel. Whether this belief had any objective truth or was merely psychological reinforcement remains debated among scholars. But the cultists' devotion to maintaining the language kept it alive into the sequel trilogy era. Modern attempts to translate Sith texts face numerous challenges. The lack of living native speakers means pronunciation guides are incomplete at best. The deliberate ambiguity built into the language makes definitive translations nearly impossible for many passages. Multiple valid interpretations of the same text can lead to entirely different understandings of Sith philosophy or technique descriptions. The connection between the Sith language and the ancient Zepho civilization has recently gained attention. Inscriptions found in the Night Sisters Temple on Peridea, written in Ur-Kitat, reference Kujet, an ancient Zepho dark side wielder. This suggests that the Sith may have adapted Ur-Kitat from an even older language originating outside the known galaxy, implying that the roots of Sith knowledge stretch back farther and reach deeper than previously understood. The relationship between the doctrine of the Dyad and the rule of two demonstrates the interpretive complexity of Sith texts. When translated into Ur-Kitat, these two concepts use nearly identical text, with only subtle inflections and line breaks distinguishing them. This explains how Darth Bane could have misinterpreted an ancient doctrine about two becoming one in the Force as a rule about maintaining only two Sith at any time. The language's precision became its ambiguity, allowing each generation to find the meaning they sought. Learning to speak Ur-Kitat required more than memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules. Students had to open themselves to the dark side, allowing its energy to flow through them as they shaped the harsh sounds. This made the learning process itself a form of dark side training, each lesson deepening the student's connection to that aspect of the Force. The language became a tool for corruption, transforming learners even as they studied it. The few Jedi who attempted to learn Ur-Kitat for academic purposes found the experience disturbing. Even with the best intentions, repeatedly shaping their mouths and vocal cords to produce those harsh, authoritative sounds began to influence their thinking. The language carried emotional weight that transcended mere definition, imbuing speakers with the aggressive, domineering mindset that characterized Sith culture. The science of twisted life, of all the dark side disciplines, few inspired more terror or revulsion than Sith alchemy. While lightsaber combat demonstrated skill and force, lightning showed raw power. Alchemy revealed something more disturbing: the Sith's willingness and ability to fundamentally alter the fabric of life itself. This wasn't mere genetic engineering or biological modification. Sith alchemy combined the Force with advanced scientific understanding to permanently transform living beings and inanimate objects in ways that violated natural law. The Jedi Order rejected Sith alchemy as an act of treason against the Force's will. They saw it as the ultimate expression of Sith arrogance, the belief that Darksiders could reshape reality to suit their desires rather than working in harmony with the natural order. But this moral objection did nothing to diminish alchemy's effectiveness. Throughout Sith history, alchemical masters created horrors and wonders that shaped the course of galactic events. The origins of Sith alchemy trace back to the earliest days of the Sith species on Korriban. Even before the arrival of the Dark Jedi, the native Sith possessed knowledge of techniques they referred to as magic, primitive forms of Force manipulation that could alter flesh and bone. These early practices were crude and dangerous, often killing the subjects as frequently as they succeeded. But they laid the groundwork for what would come later. When the human Dark Jedi exiles arrived with their refined understanding of the Force, they recognized the potential in these primitive techniques. They combined the Sith species' instinctive grasp of dark side transformation with their own sophisticated Force knowledge, creating a hybrid discipline that surpassed what either group could have achieved alone. The result was Sith alchemy, as we understand it today, a systematic approach to using the dark side to permanently alter matter. Sith alchemy encompassed a vast array of techniques, but they shared common principles. The alchemist had to establish a connection between themselves, the Force, and the subject being altered. This connection allowed dark side energy to flow through the alchemist and into the subject, restructuring it at a fundamental level. The process required immense concentration, deep knowledge of both the dark side and the nature of the subject, and often rare materials that served as catalysts or anchors for the transformation. Unlike temporary Force powers that faded when concentration broke, alchemical changes were permanent. Once an alchemist successfully transformed a creature or object, that transformation persisted regardless of the alchemist's continued presence or even their death. This permanence made alchemy extraordinarily valuable, but also extremely difficult to master. Mistakes couldn't be easily corrected, and failed experiments resulted in twisted abominations that served as warnings to less skilled practitioners. One of the most famous applications of Sith alchemy involved the augmentation of weapons and armor. Sith swords, the predecessors to lightsabers, were crafted through elaborate alchemical processes that imbued the metal with dark side energy. These weren't simply sharp blades. Alchemically enhanced Sith swords could resist lightsaber strikes, something normal metal could never accomplish. The dark side energy woven into the weapon's structure created a defensive field that could turn aside even a Jedi's blade. The creation of a Sith sword required weeks or months of continuous ritual work. The smith would forge the blade using traditional metalworking techniques, but throughout the process, they channeled dark side energy into the metal. Specific incantations had to be recited at precise moments during heating and cooling. The quenching process often involved blood or other organic materials that served as conduits for the Force. The resulting weapon emerged as more than mere metal. It became a living extension of the dark side itself. Ludo Kresh, one of the ancient Dark Lords, was known to have created a Sith sword of masterful workmanship that may have served as a talismanic focus for other dark side abilities. Wielding such a weapon didn't just provide a physical advantage in combat. The blade itself resonated with dark side energy, amplifying the wielder's connection to that aspect of the Force and making their other powers more potent. Sith armor underwent similar alchemical enhancement. Dark armor had been part of Sith culture since the beginning, with alchemists developing methods to increase the protection offered by armor through the incorporation of various substances and chemicals. The process was expensive, requiring rare materials and tremendous amounts of the alchemist's time and Force energy. But the results justified the investment. Enhanced armor could turn aside attacks that would penetrate normal protection. It could integrate talismanic Force powers, allowing the wearer to activate stored abilities without drawing on their own reserves. Some variants included stealth capabilities, making the wearer harder to detect through both technological sensors and Force perception. Others incorporated advanced technological adaptations, creating hybrid systems that combined machinery with living dark side energy. King Adas, the legendary Sith ruler who first united Korriban, wore a suit of alchemical armor rumored to be extraordinarily powerful. This armor not only protected him in battle, but may have contributed to his ability to successfully resist the Rakatan Infinite Empire when they attempted to conquer the Sith. The armor's exact properties were lost to history, but accounts suggest it granted supernatural durability and strength beyond even Adas's considerable natural abilities. Darth Vader's iconic black armor represents a later evolution of Sith armor alchemy. While primarily technological in construction, Vader's suit incorporated dark side enhancements that went beyond mere machinery. The armor boosted the Dark Lord's physical abilities despite his shattered body, kept his organs functional through a combination of technology and Force manipulation, and created an aura of intimidation that affected those who encountered him on a subconscious level. Even after Vader's redemption and death, even after his body was cremated on Endor's forest moon, remnants of his armor retained their potency as dark side relics. Years later, the possessed Jedi Kip Durin could sense the cold essence of these remains, drawn to them by the dark power still clinging to the partially melted fragments. This persistent energy demonstrates the permanent nature of alchemical enhancement. The dark side woven into the armor's structure didn't dissipate even with Vader's return to the light. Belia Darzu, a female Sith general who kept the Order alive before the Battle of Ruusan, wore dark battle armor that alchemically boosted her strength far beyond human norms. The armor made her reflexes supernatural in speed and reaction time, allowing her to compete with opponents who would have otherwise overwhelmed her through physical superiority alone. Her armor became inseparable from her identity, a second skin that defined her as much as her own flesh. But weapon and armor enhancement represented only the beginning of Sith alchemy's potential. The discipline's true horror emerged when alchemists turned their attention to living beings, creating the abominations known as Sith spawn. Sith spawn were creatures twisted by Sith alchemy, their genetics and physiology fundamentally altered to serve their master's purposes. The Massassi warriors, originally a caste of the Sith species, were alchemically enhanced to become even more formidable soldiers. These transformations made them larger, stronger, and more resistant to injury, but at the cost of their free will and much of their intelligence. The enhanced Massassi became living weapons, loyal unto death and capable of fighting with savage efficiency. The process of creating Sith spawn began with selection of appropriate subjects. The alchemist needed living creatures with genetic characteristics suitable for modification. Pure genetic stock worked best. Hybrid or genetically varied species presented complications that often resulted in failure. Once selected, the subject would be immobilized through technological restraints or forced paralysis. The transformation itself was agonizing. The alchemist would open themselves as a conduit for dark side energy, channeling it into the subject while simultaneously applying their scientific understanding of genetics and biology. This dual approach, combining mystical force manipulation with practical biological knowledge, allowed changes that neither method could achieve alone. The subject's DNA would literally rewrite itself under the force's influence, guided by the alchemist's will and knowledge. Failed transformations were common and resulted in creatures that were neither their original form nor the intended final product. These mistakes often had to be destroyed as they were unstable, in constant pain, and frequently dangerous to everything around them. Successful transformations produced creatures perfectly adapted to their new purpose, whether as war beasts, guardians, or specimens, for further study and experimentation. The ancient Sith Empire created numerous varieties of Sith spawn, war beasts capable of tearing through entire battalions, creatures bred specifically to hunt Jedi, engineered with natural resistance to force powers, guardian monsters placed in tombs to prevent looters from disturbing the dead. Each type required specific alchemical formulas and techniques, knowledge that was carefully guarded and passed only to trusted students. Exar Kun, a fallen Jedi, who became a Sith Lord millennia after the original Empire, was particularly skilled at creating Sith spawn. On Yavin 4, where he established his base, Kun conducted extensive alchemical experiments that produced numerous monstrosities. Some of these creatures survived for thousands of years after Kun's death, lurking in the jungles and ruins, still carrying out their long-dead creator's directives. When the rebels established their base on Yavin 4, before the Battle of Yavin, they were fortunate that most of Kun's creations were dormant or had long since perished. Perhaps the most disturbing application of Sith alchemy involved the resurrection and control of the dead. Through complex incantations and rituals, Sith Lords could reanimate corpses, bringing them back to a grotesque semblance of life as mindless servants. These undead servants retained none of their original personality or memories, but could follow simple commands with mechanical precision. The legendary Sith King Dathka Grouch combined alchemical sciences with his mastery of Sith sorcery to create an army of undead monstrosities from corpses left on battlefields during Korriban's cyclical civil wars. This army of reanimated dead fighters gave Grouch a tremendous advantage over his rivals, as his forces never truly diminished no matter how many battles he fought. Even destroying the undead proved difficult, as they felt no pain and continued fighting until physically incapable of movement. Grouch's techniques required tremendous power and knowledge to replicate. The ritual to create an undead servant involved binding the corpse to the alchemist's will through dark side energy, infusing dead tissue with enough force energy to simulate life functions. The resulting creature wasn't truly alive. It was animated dead matter held together and directed by the alchemist's power. But for most practical purposes, it functioned as a loyal soldier that never tired, never questioned orders, and never felt fear. Millennia later, Darth Sidious attempted to achieve something similar through Project Blackwing, an Imperial endeavor to create immortality through Sith alchemy. The project team, working under Sidious's direction, used ancient alchemical techniques combined with advanced Imperial technology to develop a process they hoped would allow consciousness to survive death by animating dead tissue. The experiment failed catastrophically. Instead of creating true immortality, Project Blackwing resulted in a virus that resurrected the dead, but without any higher consciousness or control. The infected became little more than mindless creatures driven by base instincts, attacking any living beings they encountered. The virus spread rapidly, leading to a widespread contamination that the Empire struggled to contain. The incident remained classified, but it demonstrated both the power and the profound danger of Sith alchemical experiments. The virus demonstrated that while Sith alchemy could animate dead tissue, truly transferring consciousness or creating actual immortality remained beyond even the most powerful alchemists' capabilities during the Imperial era. The physical toll on Sith alchemists themselves was substantial. Creating Sith spawn or enhanced weapons drained the alchemists' reserves, both physically and through the Force. Extensive alchemical work could leave practitioners weakened for days or weeks. The very act of channeling dark side energy through one's body to permanently alter other matter took a toll that accumulated over time. More insidiously, the practice of Sith alchemy drew practitioners deeper into the dark side with each use. Every successful transformation, every creature created, every object enhanced, strengthened the alchemist's connection to darkness and weakened any remaining ties to the light. This wasn't merely a side effect, it was an inherent feature of the discipline. To permanently alter reality through the dark side required surrendering to darkness more completely with each working. Some alchemists tried to minimize this effect by working in groups, distributing the spiritual burden among multiple practitioners. But even this mitigation had limits. The lead alchemist still bore the brunt of the corruption, and eventually, every practitioner of alchemy found themselves transformed by their own art, becoming as twisted spiritually as the creatures they created physically. Sith alchemy also required extensive knowledge that took years or decades to accumulate. An aspiring alchemist needed to understand genetics, biology, chemistry, physics, and dozens of other scientific disciplines. They needed mastery of multiple Force techniques and deep familiarity with dark side theory. They needed access to rare materials and often expensive equipment, and they needed willing subjects or the power to capture unwilling ones. This combination of requirements meant that true Sith alchemical masters were rare even during the height of the Sith Empire. Most Sith Lords possessed basic alchemical knowledge, enough to enhance a weapon or create simple potions, but only a handful in each generation achieved the expertise necessary for major works, like creating new species of Sith spawn or constructing artifacts of true power. Sorcerer Sin, one of the original Dark Jedi exiles, was a masterful alchemist who described herself as a grower of living weapons and plagues. She found that dead cells were easier to work with than living ones, as dead tissue didn't resist her manipulations. This insight allowed her to create sophisticated biological weapons, including designer plagues that targeted specific species or individuals with particular genetic markers. The ethics of Sith alchemy were, from the Jedi perspective, non-existent. Alchemists routinely experimented on sentient beings against their will, often leaving them in states worse than death. Subjects who survived failed transformations frequently begged to be killed rather than continue existing in their mutilated forms. The suffering generated by these experiments fueled the dark side, creating feedback loops where the pain of the subjects empowered the alchemist, allowing even more ambitious and horrible transformations. Despite the moral objections and the personal costs, Sith alchemy remained a cornerstone of dark side practice throughout the Order's history. Knowledge of alchemical techniques was preserved in holocrons, recorded in ancient texts, and passed from master to apprentice. Even after the implementation of the Rule of Two reduced the number of Sith dramatically, alchemy persisted as a crucial discipline. Modern applications of Sith alchemy appeared even in the sequel trilogy era. When Kylo Ren's iconic helmet was shattered during his confrontation with Snoke, the Simeong metalsmith Albrecht repaired it using Saracen iron strengthened through Sith alchemy. The reforged helmet emerged stronger than before, its cracks sealed with alchemically enhanced metal that created a visual reminder of Kylo's journey, while reinforcing the helmet structure against future damage. This application shows how Sith alchemical knowledge survived into the modern era, maintained by cultists and craftsmen who preserved ancient techniques. The process Albrecht used would have been recognizable to Sith alchemists from millennia past, demonstrating the timeless nature of these dark disciplines. The planet Ora Terra hosted a Sith pyramid at the Akablas Vergence, where alchemists performed rituals on the structure's balcony. The Vergence, a location where the Force was naturally stronger, amplified the alchemist's abilities, allowing transformations that might have been impossible elsewhere. Many important alchemical sites were deliberately established at such locations, leveraging natural force phenomena to enhance artificial manipulations. Iloxo contained ancient alchemical research sites whose exact purpose remained unclear even to modern scholars. The ruins suggested large-scale operations, possibly factory-like facilities, where Sith spawn were mass-produced for military purposes. If these interpretations are correct, they indicate an industrial approach to alchemy that went far beyond individual artisans creating bespoke horrors. During the Clone Wars, both Darth Sidious and his apprentice Darth Tyrannus employed Sith alchemy in their campaign against the Jedi. When Master Yoda ventured to Moraband seeking answers from the ancient Sith, both Sith Lords used alchemical techniques to attack him, combining the discipline with their other powers to create a multi-layered assault on the venerable Jedi Master. Though Yoda survived, the experience demonstrated that Sith alchemy remained a viable combat technique, not merely a tool for laboratory work. When Darth Sidious attempted to enter the world between worlds during the Galactic Civil War, he employed Sith alchemy to peer inside the mystical realm and create blue flames capable of dragging Force users through dimensional barriers. This application showed alchemy's versatility. It wasn't limited to enhancing physical objects or transforming living creatures, but could manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself when wielded by a sufficiently powerful practitioner. The knowledge required for Sith alchemy was dangerous, even when merely studied without practice. Texts describing alchemical formulas often contain detailed descriptions of processes that could corrupt readers who dwelled too long on the implications. Diagrams showing the transformation of living beings into Sith spawn depicted suffering in such detail that sensitive individuals reported nightmares after viewing them. The knowledge itself seemed to carry a psychic weight that affected those who encountered it. The art of eternal knowledge. Among all Sith artifacts, few were as significant as holocrons. These pyramid-shaped devices were far more than simple data storage. They were living repositories of knowledge, personality fragments of their creators preserved in crystal matrices that could teach, advise, and sometimes manipulate those who activated them. Understanding how Sith holocrons were created requires delving into one of the dark side's most closely guarded secrets, a process so complex that many Sith Lords attempted and failed to master it across the millennia. The technology for creating holocrons came to the Sith through the Rakata of the Infinite Empire. These powerful Force users shared holocron construction secrets with the Sith King Adus, hoping to gain his trust and eventually enslave his people. Adus accepted their knowledge, but saw through their deception, ultimately rebelling against the Rakata and driving them from Sith space. But the knowledge remained, and Adus created the first known Sith holocron, establishing a tradition that would define how Sith preserved their wisdom for future generations. The Jedi later learned holocron construction techniques, probably by studying mysterious Rakatan artifacts left behind when the Infinite Empire collapsed. However, Jedi holocrons took a cubic form and operated on different philosophical principles than their Sith counterparts. Jedi holocrons emphasized teaching appropriate knowledge to users based on their level of training, carefully restricting dangerous information. Sith holocrons, conversely, typically granted users unlimited access to their entire repository, believing that those strong enough to claim the knowledge deserved it regardless of preparation. The physical structure of a Sith holocron was deceptively simple in appearance, but extraordinarily complex internally. The device took the form of a pyramid, typically four-sided, though some variations existed. The smooth surfaces were etched with strange symbols and ancient hieroglyphs, often including dark incantations inscribed in various Sith scripts. These weren't merely decorative. The inscriptions served as focusing channels for the dark side energy that powered the device and protected it from unauthorized access. At the holocron's apex rested the capstone, a black crystal that served as both the device's energy source and the home for the gatekeeper, the cognitive essence of the holocron's creator. This crystal was absolutely crucial. Without a properly prepared capstone, the entire construction would fail. Many aspiring holocron creators succeeded in building the device's structure only to have their work collapse when they couldn't properly establish the capstone. Inside the holocron's casing lay an intricate crystal matrix, a three-dimensional lattice of intertwined filaments and strands. This matrix had to be constructed with subatomic precision, requiring thousands of minute adjustments to align properly. Each crystalline strand needed to be positioned exactly, its molecular structure tuned to specific frequencies that allowed it to store information in patterns of energy and matter that transcended normal physics. Creating this matrix required powers that only Force users possessed. No amount of technological sophistication could replicate the precision needed. Only by manipulating individual atoms through the Force could one achieve the tolerances necessary for a functioning holocron. Even among Force-sensitive individuals, this level of micro-manipulation demanded extraordinary control and concentration. The rare crystals used in holocron construction weren't standard kyber crystals like those used in lightsabers. Holocron crystals required specific properties that made them receptive to cognitive patterns and capable of storing vast amounts of information in multidimensional arrays. These crystals were exceptionally difficult to find, often located in dangerous or remote locations that tested seekers as much as any trial. The construction process could not be rushed. Each adjustment to the crystal matrix required deep meditation and careful application of Force energy. The creator had to envision the structure they wanted to build in perfect detail, then use the Force to shape reality to match that vision. A single mistake, one misaligned strand, or improperly tuned crystal would cause cascade failures that rendered the entire device useless. As the Sha'ido shapeshifter Belia Darzu explained in her holocron, the process could take months to perfect, though some holocrons might be completed within a few weeks by exceptionally skilled creators. But time spent was no guarantee of success. Many Sith Lords invested months in construction only to have their holocron fail at the final stage, forcing them to begin again from scratch. Each holocron was unique to its creator. Following another's blueprint wouldn't work. The cognitive patterns that needed to be embedded to the device were specific to individual minds, and attempting to replicate someone else's structure resulted in dysfunction. This meant that every Sith Lord who wanted to create a holocron had to develop their own understanding of the process, adapting general principles to their particular situation and abilities. The most challenging aspect of holocron creation was capturing the creator's essence in the capstone. This required performing the rite of commencement, an elaborate ritual that had been lost and rediscovered multiple times throughout Sith history. By the era of Darth Bane, thousands of years after the ancient Sith Empire, the secrets of this ritual had become so rare that Bane searched for years without success before learning of their location. The rite of commencement involved creating a copy of the Sith Lord's consciousness, not a mere recording, but a living cognitive network that possessed genuine intelligence and personality. This copy had to be sophisticated enough to interact with users, answer questions, provide instruction, and even demonstrate techniques through holographic projection. Yet it also had to be stable enough to exist for millennia, without degrading or developing in ways that diverged from the creator's intentions. During the ritual, the Sith Lord would enter a deep meditative state, opening themselves completely to the force. They would project their mind into the prepared capstone crystal, imprinting patterns of thought, memory, and personality into the crystal structure. This wasn't a simple data transfer. It required literally restructuring the crystal at a quantum level to create a matrix capable of supporting consciousness. The process was dangerous. Opening one's mind so completely created vulnerability to outside influences. If another Force user interfered during the rite, they could corrupt the emergent gatekeeper or even damage the creator's original mind. Sith Lords performing this ritual typically did so in heavily protected locations, often within their personal strongholds behind multiple layers of security and defensive wards. The resulting gatekeeper bore the appearance and personality of its creator, but existed as an entirely separate entity. It could learn new information as users consulted it, developing beyond its creator's original knowledge base. However, it remained fundamentally limited by its nature as a construct. The gatekeeper couldn't grow spiritually or emotionally in the ways a living being couldn't develop new motivations or question its fundamental purpose. Sith holocron gatekeepers varied in how they chose to share information. Unlike their Jedi counterparts, which carefully rationed knowledge based on the user's perceived readiness, most Sith gatekeepers granted unlimited access to anyone who successfully activated the device. This reflected Sith philosophy. Those strong enough to claim knowledge deserved it regardless of whether they were prepared to use it safely. However, some gatekeepers did restrict information, typically when the creator had intentionally designed such limitations. The holocron of heresies, created by Darth and Dedu, refused to teach Darth Bane certain advanced techniques until he had mastered prerequisite skills. The gatekeeper explained that attempting the advanced techniques without proper foundation would result in failure or death, making restriction a practical matter rather than a moral judgment. Darth Bane's lengthy quest to learn holocron construction demonstrates the rarity and difficulty of this knowledge even during the Sith's long history. Bane had made numerous unsuccessful attempts over several years, coming close to success but never achieving a functional result. His apprentice, Darth Zana, eventually learned of a possibility to find the secrets on the planet Tython, where the deceased Dark Lord Belia Darzu had hidden her fortress and holocron. Tython was a deep-core world extremely difficult to reach due to dangerous hyperspace routes and the world's remoteness. The fortress itself was protected by layers of defenses that had remained active for more than 2 centuries after Darzu's death. When Bane finally reached the structure, he discovered her holocron guarded by an army of technobeasts, creatures infected with the nanogene spore that Darzu had weaponized. Technobeasts represented another form of Sith alchemy, this time combining biological and mechanical elements. The nanogene spore was a weaponized virus that converted living tissue into organic technology, creating cyborg creatures that served as both biological beings and machines. These infected creatures, called metanecrons, had waited in Darzu's fortress for centuries, their programming still active and directing them to attack any intruders. The resulting battle lasted over an hour as Bane fought through dozens of technobeasts. His armor, encrusted with obelisks that protected him and enhanced his dark side connection, saved his life multiple times. When one technobeast infected him with the nanogene spore, The orbalisks purged the virus from his system before it could lobotomize his brain. The parasitic creatures that Bane had acquired on the moon, Dia-Chun proved invaluable. Their symbiotic relationship with him extended to active defense against biological threats. After finally destroying all the techno-beasts, Bane claimed Balia Darzu's holocron and activated it. The Shaido Gatekeeper appeared in Darzu's form, demonstrating the shapeshifter's characteristic ability to alter appearance. Through interaction with this gatekeeper, Bane learned a complete process of holocron creation, including the long elusive rite of commencement. The holocron showed detailed cutaway images of its own internal structure, allowing Bane to understand how the crystal matrix was arranged. It explained the specific force techniques required for each stage of construction. Most importantly, it revealed how to trap the cognitive network inside the capstone through the ritual, the single piece of knowledge that had eluded Bane despite years of research. The gatekeeper emphasized that the adjustments to the matrix had to be made with precision and care, that the process couldn't be rushed. Even with complete instructions, creating a holocron remained an achievement that marked a Sith Lord as having reached the highest levels of dark side mastery. The discipline required to perform the rite of commencement tested the Creator's focus, power, and understanding of the Force in ways few other endeavors could match. By the era of the Great Jedi Purge, nearly all records containing information about holocron creation had been lost or deliberately destroyed. The knowledge had become so rare that only a handful of beings in the galaxy possessed it, and most of them were either in hiding or dead. This near extinction of the technique ensured that each new generation of Sith had to rediscover or reinvent the process, often through years of trial and error. The value of holocrons to the Sith Order cannot be overstated. These devices allowed knowledge to persist across centuries or millennia, surviving long after the Creator's death. A Sith Lord who created a holocron achieved a form of immortality, their personality and teachings preserved for future generations. The gatekeeper could instruct students the Creator would never meet, spreading the Creator's philosophy and techniques far beyond what any living teacher could accomplish. Darth Revan's holocron, created during the Jedi Civil War, contained valuable knowledge that helped Darth Bane establish the rule of 2,000 years later. The holocron had survived through countless wars, regime changes, and attempted purges, waiting in a forgotten temple on Lehan until Bane discovered it. The gatekeeper that greeted Bane was the same personality construct Revan had created millennia earlier, unchanged by the passage of time. Darth Andedu's holocron of heresies contained forbidden knowledge on Sith immortality and essence transfer, techniques considered heretical, even by many dark side standards. This holocron proved so dangerous that its possession often led to conflict, with various Sith Lords fighting to claim it across the centuries. Even the gatekeeper's personality was reputedly unstable, reflecting Andedu's own madness and obsession with eternal life. Darth Sidious created multiple holocrons throughout his long career as a Sith Lord. These devices stored his extensive knowledge of Sith techniques and dark side powers, serving as backups should his physical form be destroyed. When Sidious returned in the sequel trilogy, having cheated death through clone bodies and dark side techniques, His holocrons had preserved crucial knowledge that aided his plans. Darth Krayt, leader of the one Sith that arose over a century after the original Sith's apparent destruction, possessed the holocrons of previous Sith lords, including Bane, Darth Nihilus, and Andedu. By studying these ancient teaching devices, Krayt gained insights from multiple Sith traditions, synthesizing their diverse approaches into his own philosophy. He also created his own holocron, adding his knowledge to the chain of Sith wisdom that stretched back millennia. The ability to access and learn from holocrons marked someone as possessing at least rudimentary dark side knowledge. The devices were deliberately designed to require force activation, specifically through dark side energy. A Jedi attempting to open a Sith holocron would find the device resistant, often requiring them to call upon anger or other dark emotions to generate sufficient dark side energy for activation. This created a catch-22. Gaining knowledge from Sith holocrons required using the dark side, which itself corrupted the user and drew them deeper into darkness. Some individuals, like the Jedi historian Atris, believed they could study Sith holocrons without falling to darkness. Atris assembled a large collection of these devices, intending to understand the Sith through their own recorded teachings. But the very act of repeatedly activating the holocrons, channeling dark side energy to access them, and being exposed to their corrupting knowledge, gradually transformed her. The gatekeepers recognized her growing darkness and encouraged it, subtly guiding her toward full corruption. The discovery of a Sith holocron often triggered conflicts. Jedi and Sith both sought these devices, the Jedi to study or destroy them, and the Sith to learn from them. Archaeologists and historians pursued them for academic reasons. Criminal organizations sought them for sale to the highest bidder. The device's rarity and power made them valuable beyond measure, and their owners often died defending them from those who would take them by force. Lumia, who became a Dark Lady of the Sith after training under Darth Vader's tutelage, managed to obtain the holocron of King Adas himself. This was one of the oldest known Sith holocrons, created roughly 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin by the legendary Sith ruler who had first united Korriban and resisted the Rakatan Infinite Empire. The knowledge contained within this ancient device predated even the arrival of the Dark Jedi exiles, preserving pure Sith species teachings from before their culture was influenced by human dark side philosophy. The locations where holocrons were stored became significant in their own right. Sith tombs often contained the creator's holocron, placed there as a teaching tool for any who proved worthy of navigating the tomb's defenses. Sith temples maintained libraries of holocrons, creating repositories of dark side knowledge that attracted serious students and protected these collections with elaborate wards and guardian creatures. The Korriban Sith Academy maintained an extensive holocron collection during its operation, allowing students to learn from multiple ancient Sith lords simultaneously. This exposure to diverse teachings helped students develop versatile approaches to the dark side, rather than being limited to a single master's perspective. However, it also meant that less stable students were exposed to potentially incompatible philosophies that could drive them to madness. The art of creating holocrons required synthesis of multiple disciplines, deep force mastery, scientific understanding of crystal structures, knowledge of ritual practices, access to rare materials, and the mental discipline to successfully perform the rite of commencement. This combination meant that only the most accomplished Sith Lords even attempted holocron creation, and many of those who tried failed despite their other achievements. The permanence of holocrons also created challenges. A gatekeeper, captured at one point in the creator's life, couldn't account for knowledge or insights gained later. Some Sith Lords attempted to update their holocrons, adding new information or even attempting to modify the gatekeeper's personality. These efforts rarely succeeded. The cognitive network established during the rite of commencement resisted modification, and attempts to alter it often resulted in holocron failure. As a result, most Sith Lords who created holocrons did so late in their careers, when they believed they had accumulated the full measure of knowledge worth preserving. This created a certain irony. The wisest and most powerful Sith, those most capable of successfully creating holocrons, were also those closest to death or defeat. Many holocrons were created in the shadow of impending doom, final acts of Sith Lords who wanted their knowledge to survive even if they could not. The weapon that ended an era. Among the many horrors created through Sith ingenuity, few weapons matched the thought bomb in terms of pure destructive potential focused specifically on Force-sensitive beings. This wasn't a conventional explosive or even a typical Force technique. The thought bomb represented something far more sinister, a ritual that weaponized Force sensitivity itself, turning the very connection that gave Jedi and Sith their power into a conduit for mutual annihilation. The thought bomb's origins stretch back to the ritual of Nathema, performed by the Sith Lord who would become known as Emperor Vitiate. This ritual, conducted approximately 5,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, involved gathering hundreds of Sith Lords under false pretenses and then using them as fuel for a dark side working of unprecedented scale. Vitiate drained the life essence of every living thing on the planet Nathema, creating a void in the Force and granting himself near immortality and immense power. The principle behind this ritual, channeling massive amounts of Force energy through multiple Force-sensitive beings simultaneously and releasing it catastrophically, provided the foundation for what would later become the thought bomb technique. However, Vitiate's ritual was unique, tailored specifically to his goal of achieving immortality. The knowledge of how to adapt his technique into a deployable weapon required additional development and refinement. During the Jedi Civil War, the fallen Jedi Revan rediscovered and studied Vitiate's work. Revan's unique position, having served both the light and dark sides of the Force, gave him insights that pure dark side practitioners lacked. He understood how to modify the ritual of Nathema's principles, creating a version that could be contained and triggered deliberately rather than requiring years of preparation. Revan recorded this modified technique in his holocron, storing it in a forgotten temple on the planet Lehan. The secrets remained hidden for approximately 3,000 years, until Darth Bane discovered Revan's holocron during his own quest for ancient knowledge. Bane was a Sith Lord who had grown disillusioned with the Brotherhood of Darkness, an organization of Sith that had abandoned many traditional Sith principles in favor of a more egalitarian approach. Under the leadership of Lord Scare Khan, the Brotherhood emphasized cooperation among Sith Lords rather than the traditional hierarchy that placed one Dark Lord above all others. Bane saw the Brotherhood as fundamentally flawed, a perversion of true Sith philosophy that could never achieve lasting dominance over the Jedi. His discovery of Revan's holocron and its thought bomb technique gave him the tool he needed to destroy the Brotherhood entirely and rebuild the Sith according to his own vision. But Bane was cunning. He wouldn't simply tell Khan about the thought bomb and hope he used it. Instead, he crafted an elaborate deception. Bane sent the instructions for creating a thought bomb to Khan, presenting it as a superweapon that would allow the Brotherhood to win their ongoing war against the Jedi's army of light. The technique, he claimed, would destroy the Jedi while leaving the Sith unharmed. This was a deliberate lie. Bane knew from Revan's records that the thought bomb killed every Force-sensitive being within its blast radius indiscriminately, Jedi and Sith alike. The Brotherhood of Darkness and the Army of Light had been locked in conflict on the world of Ruusan for years. This war, part of the larger conflict known as the New Sith Wars, had dragged on through 7 major battles, each more devastating than the last. Casualties on both sides mounted, and neither faction could achieve decisive victory. The Jedi fought to destroy the Sith and protect the Republic, while the Sith sought to finally overwhelm the Jedi Order and establish dark side dominion over the galaxy. As the 7th Battle of Ruusan began, Lord Khan grew desperate. The Army of Light, led by Jedi Master Hoth, had proven resilient beyond expectations. Despite the Sith's numbers and power, they couldn't break the Jedi defensive positions. Khan's leadership was being questioned by other members of the Brotherhood, with some Sith Lords openly challenging his decisions. He needed a decisive victory to maintain his position and win the war. Bane's message arrived at this perfect moment of desperation. The promised thought bomb seemed like the solution to all Khan's problems. He ordered his Sith Lords to gather the rare materials and conduct the ritual, following Revan's instructions as transmitted by Bane. Some members of the Brotherhood, including the Sith Lord Kopech, voiced concerns about Bane's trustworthiness. But Khan, either unwilling or unable to see the trap, pushed forward with the plan. The thought bomb required a substantial number of Force sensitives to pool their power. The more Sith who contributed to the ritual, the larger and more devastating the blast would be. Khan gathered the Brotherhood's members into a series of caves on Ruusan, establishing the ritual space and preparing to work in. He sent word to the Army of Light, taunting them and ensuring they would follow the Sith into the caves, believing it to be a final confrontation. Master Hoth, leading the Jedi forces, recognized the potential trap but saw no alternative. Allowing the Sith to complete whatever they were planning unopposed seemed even more dangerous than walking into an ambush. He led a substantial contingent of Jedi Knights and Masters into the caves, confronting the Brotherhood in the underground chambers. What followed was unlike any battle the galaxy had seen before or since. The Sith Lords began channeling their power into the thought bomb ritual, creating a resonance in the Force that every sensitive being on the planet could feel. The Jedi, recognizing something catastrophic was occurring, attempted to disrupt the ritual through combat and Force techniques, but the process had progressed too far to stop. The detonation, when it came, released a wave of pure Force energy that targeted consciousness itself. The thought bomb didn't destroy physical matter like a conventional explosion. Instead, it attacked the force connection that gave force sensitives their abilities, severing that connection catastrophically and fatally. Every Jedi and Sith within the blast radius died instantaneously, their consciousness ripped from their bodies. But even worse than death, the souls of those killed by the thought bomb weren't released to become one with the Force as normally happened. Instead, they became trapped within a physical manifestation of the blast itself, a floating metallic orb that formed at the detonation site. The spirits of hundreds of Jedi and Sith Lords were imprisoned within this orb, conscious but unable to move on, forced to experience unending suffering and the awareness of all the other trapped souls around them. The orb itself emanated terrible force energy. Any force-sensitive being who touched it or came too close experienced the trapped soul's suffering directly, overwhelming sensations that could drive even strong-willed individuals to madness in moments. The orb would remain on Ruusan for years after the blast, a memorial and warning of the thought bomb's terrible power. Darth Bane had positioned himself several kilometers from the detonation site, far enough to avoid the blast radius but close enough to sense its effects through the Force. He felt the massive release of energy as hundreds of Force users died simultaneously, their collective death scream echoing through the Force like thunder. Despite his distance, the after effects of the thought bomb affected him, causing terrible headaches and vivid hallucinations of deceased Brotherhood members that would persist for weeks. Among those killed were Lord Scare Khan and the other senior members of the Brotherhood of Darkness. Master Hoth and most of the Army of Light's leadership also perished. The Brotherhood's apprentice Githani, who had once been Bane's ally and lover before betraying him, died in the blast. Thousands of Force sensitives, the strongest and most skilled on both sides, were eliminated in a single terrible moment. A few Sith Lords had tried to escape before the detonation. Kopech, who had suspected Bane's treachery, attempted to flee but was too slow. Githani also tried to leave but reached the caves too late to escape. Their deaths confirmed what some had suspected. Bane had manipulated the entire Brotherhood into destroying itself. After the detonation, Bane emerged as the sole surviving Sith Lord, exactly as he had planned. While exploring the devastated battlefield, he encountered a young girl named Rain, who had been traveling with her friend Leia, a native Ruusan bouncer. Tragically, 2 Jedi soldiers had killed Leia, mistaking the creature for one of the many bouncers driven mad by the thought bomb's effects. In her grief and rage, Rain instinctively drew on the dark side and killed both Jedi soldiers. Bane, recognizing her powerful natural connection to the Force and the tragedy that had pushed her toward darkness, took her as his apprentice. He renamed her Darth Zana, making her the first apprentice under his newly established rule of 2. With the Brotherhood destroyed and only himself and Zana remaining, Bane had successfully eliminated all competition and positioned himself to rebuild the Sith Order according to his own philosophy. The Jedi believed they had won a final victory at Ruusan. They saw that both the Brotherhood of Darkness and most of the Army of Light had been destroyed, but they assumed all Sith had died in the thought bomb's blast. This incorrect assumption played perfectly into Bane's plans, allowing him and Zana to disappear into hiding while the Jedi celebrated their supposed total victory. The thought bomb's effects on Ruusan itself were substantial and long-lasting. The massive release of Force energy permanently altered the planet's weather patterns, creating storms and atmospheric disturbances that persisted for centuries. The Force itself felt different on Ruusan, carrying echoes of the terrible event that had occurred there. Force sensitives visiting the planet reported feeling oppressed, sensing the lingering trauma embedded in the very ground where hundreds had died. The floating orb that contained the trapped souls became an object of morbid fascination. Ruusan's native bouncer population, being Force-sensitive themselves, were drawn to the orb, but often driven mad by contact with it. A young human boy named Daravit, Zana's cousin, visited the cave where the thought bomb had detonated and touched the orb. The experience nearly destroyed his mind, exposes him to the suffering of every soul trapped within, and overwhelming his consciousness with their collective anguish. When Darth Bane brought Zana to the cave as part of her training, he showed her the orb as a lesson about the consequences of Sith infighting and poor leadership. The floating sphere demonstrated what happened when Sith Lords allowed themselves to be manipulated by their inferiors, when they abandoned the principles of hierarchy and strength that had defined the Sith Order throughout its history. To Bane, the thought bomb represented the ultimate proof that his philosophy was correct. The knowledge of how to create thought bombs didn't die with the Brotherhood. Bane possessed the instructions from Revan's holocron, and though he chose not to pass them to Zana, the technique's existence in recorded form meant future Sith might rediscover it. However, the specific circumstances required for its deployment, particularly the need for multiple Force sensitives willing to die to create the blast, made it unlikely to ever be used again under the rule of two. The thought bomb represented the ultimate expression of Sith destructive capability turned inward. While the Sith had created many weapons and techniques designed to destroy Jedi, the thought bomb was unique in targeting Force sensitivity itself, making it as dangerous to Sith as to their enemies. This quality made it the perfect tool for Bane's purpose, destroying the old Sith Order entirely to make room for his new vision. The philosophical implications of the thought bomb extended beyond its immediate tactical use. The device demonstrated that Force sensitivity, typically seen as a gift or advantage, could be weaponized into a fatal vulnerability. In creating a weapon that killed Force users specifically, the Sith had developed something that inverted the fundamental power dynamic between Force sensitives and normal beings. Lost to legend. Between the famous names that every Star Wars fan knows and the complete obscurity of millions of minor dark side practitioners, there exists a fascinating middle ground. Sith Lords significant enough to be remembered, but obscure enough that most scholars have never heard of them. These forgotten Sith-shaped galactic history in ways both subtle and profound, their legacies persisting, even though their names faded from common knowledge. Darth Andedu, sometimes known as the immortal God King of Prakith, stands among the most powerful Sith Lords in the extensive Legends continuity. Though much of his story remains non-canonical, his existence has been repeatedly referenced in current Star Wars media, suggesting his importance transcends the Legends canon divide. One of Palpatine's Sith legions in The Rise of Skywalker was named in Andedu's honor, indicating the ancient Sith Lord's significance to Imperial Sith ideology. And Dedu was obsessed with achieving immortality, a quest that defined his entire approach to the dark side. He developed techniques for essence transfer, allowing consciousness to move between bodies, and pioneered studies into preventing death through pure force manipulation. His holocron, called the Holocron of Heresies, contained this forbidden knowledge, along with his unstable personality construct. The gatekeeper was known for being difficult and paranoid, reflecting Dedu's own mental state. The title, Immortal God King, wasn't mere boasting, and Dedu established himself as absolute ruler of Prakith, a world he controlled through fear and force power. He maintained this rule for an extraordinarily long period through his life extension techniques, becoming a legendary figure on his world. His subjects worshipped him as a deity, unable to conceive of his mortality when he had ruled through multiple generations. An ancient curse by Dedu's flames survived into the modern era, suggesting his influence spread far beyond Prakith. The specific origin of this curse is unclear, but it likely references some catastrophic display of force power that burned itself into cultural memory. Cursing in a Sith Lord's name indicated respect for their power, even long after their death. Darth Atreus wielded a pair of cross-guard lightsabers with such fury that his rage literally tainted the weapons in the Force itself. These blades, similar in design to Kylo Ren's unstable lightsaber millennia later, became infected with Atreus's anger. For thousands of years after his death, anyone who touched these weapons experienced that same rage, an overwhelming emotion that could drive even disciplined individuals to violence. One of Atreus's blades was destroyed by Luke Skywalker during his investigations into Sith artifacts. Luke recognized the danger the weapon posed. Even brief contact had begun affecting him negatively, and he chose to eliminate it rather than risk it falling into the wrong hands. The other blade was destroyed by Darth Vader himself, who deemed its effects too unpredictable even for Sith use. The fact that Vader, who embraced anger as a source of power, considered the blade dangerous speaks to how thoroughly Atreus's rage had corrupted the weapons. Exar Kun represents one of legend's most dangerous Sith Lords, and despite his story being relegated to non-canon status, he continues to be referenced in current Star Wars continuity. The ancient Massassi temples on Yavin 4, which served as the Rebel Alliance base in the original Star Wars film, were likely built in his honor, maintaining that connection between the films and his legacy. Solo, a Star Wars story, featured a Sith artifact specifically identified as coming from the Temple of Exar Kun, cementing his existence in modern canon, even if the details of his life remain ambiguous. Exar Kun's fall to the dark side was particularly tragic. Originally a promising Jedi student, his quest for knowledge led him to Sith worlds and ancient teachings. Unlike many who fell gradually, Kun's corruption accelerated dramatically once he began studying Sith holocrons and artifacts. His natural talent combined with forbidden knowledge made him extraordinarily dangerous in a very short time. On Yavin 4, Exar Kun conducted extensive Sith alchemy experiments and enslaved the Massassi population to construct his temples. These temples weren't merely buildings. They were designed as focal points for dark side energy, amplifying Kun's power and preserving his influence long after his physical death. The Massassi who built them were eventually sacrificed in a dark ritual that allowed Khun's spirit to persist in the temples themselves. When the Rebel Alliance established their base on Yavin 4 thousands of years later, they unknowingly placed themselves in structures saturated with dark side energy. The temple's original purpose remained dormant during the Alliance's occupation, but Luke Skywalker would later return to Yavin 4 and encounter Khun's lingering spirit, which attempted to corrupt Luke's Jedi students. This demonstrates the persistent danger that ancient Sith sites pose, their dark side contamination remaining active millennia after their creators' deaths. Exim Panchard, an ancient Sith viceroy, lived during the time of the Sith Empire before the rule of two. The title Viceroy suggests he ruled territories on behalf of a higher Dark Lord, possibly managing conquered systems or serving as a regional administrator within the Empire's hierarchy. His mask, which survived into the post-Empire era, contained what were described as the primal screams of 100 innocents slain for his pleasure. This mask wasn't merely a horrific decoration. It functioned as a dark side artifact with genuine power. When Kiza, a member of the Acolytes of the Beyond, wore the mask, Panchard's spirit possessed her. The ancient Sith viceroy gained temporary physical form through her body, allowing him to interact with the physical world again. Luke Skywalker confronted this possessed individual and found Panchard to be a fearsome opponent, despite being dead for potentially thousands of years. The concept of trapping the screams and suffering of victims within an object demonstrates sophisticated dark side technique. These weren't recordings or mere echoes, but actual fragments of consciousness, torture preserved in crystallized form. The victim's eternal suffering powered the mask, making it a perpetual battery of dark side energy that could corrupt and empower whoever wore it. Gol the Wither King was encountered by Luke Skywalker when he discovered an echo of their essence trapped within a kyber crystal they had bled. The bleeding process, where a dark side user corrupts a kyber crystal to create the red color characteristic of Sith lightsabers, typically involved channeling hatred and anger into the crystal. But Gol had apparently performed this process with such intensity that fragments of his actual consciousness became embedded in the crystal itself. Luke's attempt to reverse the bleeding, purifying the crystal, and returning it to its natural state led to his confronting Gol's memories and personality directly. In a remarkable display of Jedi compassion and power, Luke successfully redeemed the ancient Sith Lord's trapped essence, freeing him from the darkness that had consumed him in life. This encounter revealed that even Sith Lords long dead might find redemption if a powerful enough Jedi intervened. The title Wither King suggests Gol ruled a territory or practiced techniques related to decay and entropy. Some Sith specialized in such powers, using the Force to accelerate decomposition, wither living tissue, or drain life force from their surroundings. These abilities were particularly feared because they bypassed conventional defenses. Armor and shields offered no protection against powers that attacked the fundamental processes of life itself. Darth Felkor remains one of the most mysterious Sith Lords in current canon. His likeness was chiseled into the rock faces of Exegol alongside other ancient Sith, suggesting he held significant importance in Sith history. Kylo Ren recognized Felkor's image, indicating the ancient Sith Lord was famous enough that someone studying Sith texts would know his name and appearance. However, Beyond this basic recognition, almost nothing is definitively known about Falcor's life, accomplishments, or particular dark side specializations. The inclusion of Falcor's visage at Exegol implies he was among the most important Sith Lords according to Palpatine's cultists. Exegol served as the final redoubt of the Sith Eternal, and the carvings there represented the legacy they sought to preserve and continue. Being memorialized alongside other legendary Sith Lords places Falcor among the dark side's elite, even if the specifics of why remain shrouded in mystery. Darth Momin represents a particularly unusual case among Sith Lords. He was originally a sculptor who was imprisoned for his disturbing art. A Sith lady named Shah discovered him, rescued him from imprisonment, and trained him in the dark side. Momin's artistic sensibility combined with dark side power in unique ways. He approached Sith techniques with the mindset of an artist rather than a warrior. Momin eventually became more powerful than his master and killed Shah, a common pattern in Sith apprentice-master relationships. He then embarked on an ambitious project, building a superweapon designed to destroy an entire city. This wasn't merely destructive capability for military purposes. Momin conceived of the destruction as a work of art, a performance piece using death and devastation as his medium. The Jedi intervened before Momin could complete his genocidal artwork. During the confrontation, he lost control of his own power, which killed him. However, Momin's consciousness persisted in his mask, similar to how Exum Panshard's spirit remained in his. This mask eventually came into Darth Vader's possession, and Momin's spirit communicated with Vader, offering knowledge and assistance. Momin's mask possessed the unusual ability to allow him to possess others temporarily, using their bodies as vessels to continue his work. Through this possession, Momin helped Vader design and construct Vader's fortress on Mustafar. The fortress's distinctive architecture bore Momin's artistic influence, creating a structure that was simultaneously functional and a dark side monument. The Sith Lord named Balia Darzu has already been mentioned in the context of holocron creation, but her other accomplishments deserve attention. Darzu was a Shi'ido, a shapeshifter species, and she used this natural ability to great advantage throughout her career. She served as one of the Sith generals who kept the Order alive before the Battle of Ruusan, leading armies and conducting research in parallel. Darzu's expertise extended beyond holocrons to include Sith alchemy and a particular force technique called Mechu Deru, the ability to manipulate machines and technology through the Force. She weaponized this skill by creating the nanogene spore, a virus that converted living tissue into organic technology. The victims of this virus became techno-beasts, cyborg creatures that blurred the line between biology and machinery. Her fortress on Tython housed both her research facilities and her army of techno-beasts. These metanecrons stood guard for centuries after her assassination, their programming intact and directing them to attack any intruders. When Darth Bane finally penetrated the fortress's defenses, he faced dozens of these creatures in extended combat, demonstrating the lasting effectiveness of Darzu's creations. Darzu's heavy dark battle suit, alchemically enhanced to boost her physical capabilities, made her a formidable opponent despite not being naturally large or strong. The suit granted her superhuman strength and reflexes while protecting her from conventional weapons. This combination of technological sophistication, alchemical enhancement, and Force power, exemplified her multidisciplinary approach to the dark side. The Sith triumvirate, consisting of Darth Nihilus, Darth Sion, and Darth Traya, represents a unique chapter in Sith history. These three Sith Lords emerged in the aftermath of the Jedi Civil War and nearly succeeded in destroying the Jedi Order entirely. Each possessed unique abilities that made them terrifying in different ways. Darth Nihilus was known as the Lord of Hunger, and the title was disturbingly literal. He had become so consumed by his need to feed on Force energy that he was essentially a wound in the Force, a living void that drained life and power from everything around him. Nihilus could kill entire planets, consuming all Force-sensitive life in moments. His power was so overwhelming that his physical body ceased to exist in any meaningful sense. He was a spirit bound to his armor and mask, held together only by the Force. Darth Sion, the Lord of Pain, had found the ability to channel his anger and hatred to keep himself alive despite catastrophic injuries. His body had become mangled severely, presumably through combat, but he refused to die. The dark side literally held his broken flesh together, animated by pure hatred and willpower. This made Sion nearly impossible to kill through conventional means. Destroying his body didn't matter as long as his rage persisted. Darth Traya was perhaps the most intellectually sophisticated of the three. She had been a Jedi Master before her fall, and her understanding of both the light and dark sides gave her unique insights. Traya became disillusioned with both the Jedi and Sith, believing that the eternal conflict between them was futile and that the Force itself was a malevolent entity that should be destroyed. Her philosophy challenged fundamental assumptions about the Force, and though she ultimately failed to achieve her goal, her ideas influenced dark side thinking for generations. The Sith Lord, known only as Darth Nox, began life as a slave, the absolute lowest position in Sith society. Through a combination of luck, natural talent, and ruthless ambition, Nox was chosen to train at a Sith academy despite this unpromising background. The fact that a slave could rise to become a Sith Inquisitor and eventually claim a seat on the Dark Council demonstrates the meritocratic aspects of Sith culture, where power mattered more than birth. Nox had a specific goal: restoring the power of a family known as the Calig. This long-term objective shaped Nox's actions throughout his rise, giving him focus beyond mere personal ambition. During his time as Inquisitor, he developed a rivalry with Darth Thanaton, an established member of the Dark Council. This rivalry culminated in a duel where Nox defeated Thanaton, claiming the council seat for himself. The victory demonstrated that even ancient, powerful Sith Lords could fall to younger, more ambitious challengers. Skara Khan, already mentioned in the context of the thought bomb, deserves further examination. He was originally a Jedi who defected to the Sith during the New Sith Wars, bringing with him extensive knowledge of Jedi tactics and philosophy. This insider understanding helped him reorganize the Sith into the Brotherhood of Darkness, an organization that represented a radical departure from traditional Sith hierarchy. Khan earned the nickname the Dark One for his success in consolidating Sith forces under his leadership. However, his rule as Dark Lord proved troubled from the start. The Brotherhood faced constant conflict against the Jedi, and internal unrest plagued the organization as various Sith Lords questioned Khan's decisions. By the end of his reign, Khan showed signs of instability and madness, making him vulnerable to Darth Bane's manipulation. Kaan's ultimate fate, dying in the thought bomb he had created while believing it would save his brotherhood, serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of desperate measures and trusting the wrong advisors. His death, along with most of the Brotherhood's leadership, cleared the way for Bane's Ruler 2 to reshape the Sith Order entirely. Tools of darkness. Beyond the Sith themselves, the artifacts and relics they created carried power that persisted long after their creators' deaths. These objects, imbued with dark side energy through ritual alchemy or prolonged exposure to corruption, became focal points for the Force's darker aspects. Understanding these artifacts reveals another dimension of how the Sith extended their influence across time and space. Sith amulets represented some of the most common dark side artifacts, though common should be understood relatively. These were still rare and valuable objects, but their production wasn't limited to only the most powerful Sith Lords. Amulets served various purposes depending on their specific enchantment, from protection to amplification of dark side powers to specific utility functions. The Amulet of Tongues was described as a crude but powerful Sith alchemical device meant to focus one's craft and learnings of the dark side. While wearing and attuned to this amulet, a dark side user would find that their force powers cost less energy to activate, allowing them to cast more abilities before exhausting themselves. The amulet essentially increased the wielder's efficiency, making them more dangerous in extended conflicts where stamina normally became a limiting factor. Beyond its combat utility, the Amulet of Tongues imbued the wearer's mind with knowledge of Sith culture. The wearer gained the ability to speak, read, and write the Sith language without prior study, a remarkable linguistic shortcut that normally required years of practice. Additionally, wearers gained advantages when creating or using Sith ritual scrolls, as the amulet enhanced their understanding of the complex incantations and procedures involved. Sith amulets of power were given to Sith warriors, servants, or even enslaved warriors to enhance their physical prowess or protection in combat. These amulets were imbued with Sith runes placed upon them during creation, with the power level varying based on the skill and resources invested by the creator. More powerful variants were typically reserved for dark acolytes or Sith apprentices who had proven their merit, while simpler versions went to disposable troops. Naga Sado, the ancient Sith Lord who led the invasion during the Great Hyperspace War, wore multiple amulets that amplified his powers significantly. These amulets allowed him to control his Sith alchemy creations more easily, projecting his will across vast distances to direct his transformed creatures in battle. Without these artifacts, Sadow's battle meditation and illusion techniques during the war would have been far less effective, possibly changing the entire course of the conflict. Sith talismans differed from amulets in their specific focuses and creation methods. While amulets tended to provide general enhancement or protection, talismans were designed for particular purposes, often tied to specific force techniques or situations. A talisman might protect against lightsaber strikes, control Sith spawn, or enhance particular dark side abilities beyond what normal training could achieve. The creation of these artifacts required extensive knowledge of Sith alchemy and enchantment. The creator had to not only understand the desired effect, but also know how to embed that capability into a physical object permanently. This typically involved a combination of rare materials, lengthy rituals, and the investment of the creator's own force energy into the object. The materials used in talisman construction weren't arbitrary. Certain metals, crystals, and organic substances had natural affinities for different types of force energy. A talisman designed to enhance force lightning might incorporate materials that naturally conducted electrical energy. Protection talismans often use materials known for durability and resistance to energy. The alchemist's skill lay in combining these materials with force energy to create effects that transcended the material's natural properties. Sith scrolls and texts deserve special mention as artifacts in their own right. These weren't simply books or documents, but objects of power whose very existence could corrupt those who studied them. The act of reading certain Sith texts exposed the reader to dark side energy embedded in the ink, parchment, and even the shapes of the letters themselves. Ancient Sith manuscripts and books contained dark rituals, spells, and prophecies that had been studied and annotated by generations of Sith lords. Each reader left traces of their own darkness in the texts, creating layers of corruption that accumulated over centuries. By the time these documents reached modern scholars, they had become saturated with dark side energy to the point where merely opening them could affect Force-sensitive individuals. The texts often contained information that could drive unprepared readers to madness. This wasn't metaphorical. The dark knowledge, presented in ways that bypassed rational analysis and worked directly on the subconscious, could fragment unprotected minds. Even experienced Jedi who attempted to study Sith texts for academic purposes reported disturbing dreams, intrusive thoughts, and emotional disturbances that persisted long after they stopped reading. Sith artifacts weren't merely powerful tools. They were expressions of their creators' philosophies and obsessions. A Sith Lord who valued deception might create artifacts that enhanced illusion abilities or made the wearer harder to detect. A warrior-focused Sith would produce weapons and armor enhancements. Those obsessed with immortality crafted life extension devices or essence transfer anchors. This meant that finding and studying Sith artifacts provided insights into the creators' minds and methods. Archaeologists and historians could reconstruct aspects of lost Sith Lords' lives by examining the artifacts they left behind. The types of power embedded in objects revealed what the creator considered important, what challenges they faced, and what goals they pursued. However, this archaeological approach came with severe risks. Sith Lords often trapped their artifacts with curses, guardian spirits, or other defensive measures designed to kill or corrupt anyone who attempted to study them without proper authorization. Many promising researchers died or fell to the dark side attempting to unlock artifacts' secrets, their ambition overwhelming their caution. The allure of Sith artifacts extended beyond Force users. Collectors, smugglers, and criminal organizations pursued these objects for their monetary value and the power they represented. A wealthy crime lord might acquire a Sith artifact as a status symbol, never activating it, but simply possessing it as proof of their resources and connections. This black market trade in Sith relics persisted throughout galactic history, with prices for authenticated artifacts reaching astronomical levels. Some artifacts changed hands violently, their possession triggering conflicts between those who sought them. The holocron of Darth and Dedu, mentioned earlier, was pursued by multiple Sith Lords across centuries, each conflict resulting in deaths before the holocron moved to new ownership. The artifact's power made it worth killing for, and its knowledge of immortality techniques made it especially valuable to aging Sith Lords desperate to extend their reigns. Museums and academic institutions sometimes acquired Sith artifacts for study and display, though this practice was controversial. Critics argued that making dark side objects accessible to the public risked corruption of visitors or theft by dark side practitioners. Supporters maintained that understanding the Sith required studying their artifacts, and that hiding everything away left the galaxy ignorant of dark side dangers. This debate continued throughout the Republic's history without clear resolution. Rituals of the Dark. Beyond the creation of physical artifacts, the Sith developed numerous ritual practices that allowed them to achieve effects impossible through simple Force application. These rituals represented the intersection of dark side philosophy, alchemical knowledge, and practical technique, creating structured approaches to wielding power that exceeded what individual practitioners could manage alone. Battle meditation represents one of the most powerful Force techniques accessible to both Jedi and Sith, but Sith practitioners approached it differently than their Jedi counterparts. Where Jedi battle meditation focused on coordination and morale enhancement, Sith battle meditation emphasized fear, confusion, and the amplification of the Darksider's personal will across entire battlefields. Naga Sadov's use of battle meditation during the Great Hyperspace War demonstrates its potential at its apex. From within his specialized meditation sphere, Sado projected his consciousness across multiple star systems simultaneously, coordinating Sith forces and creating vast illusions that multiplied his fleet's apparent size. This wasn't merely tactical communication, but active manipulation of how thousands of beings perceived reality, all directed by a single mind. The ritual aspects of Sith battle meditation required extensive preparation. The practitioner needed to establish connections with key individuals in their Force, creating Force bonds that could be activated during battle. They required a protected location where their physical body could remain undisturbed during the meditation, as their consciousness would be extended across vast distances and vulnerable to attack. And they needed tremendous reserves of dark side energy to maintain the technique for extended periods. Failed battle meditation could be catastrophic. If the practitioner's concentration broke while projecting across a battlefield, the sudden severing of all those connections created a painful backlash. Some Sith Lords had been driven unconscious or even insane by poorly executed battle meditation that collapsed under pressure. This risk made the technique something only the most skilled and confident Darksiders attempted. Spirit transference and essence transfer represented the pinnacle of Sith efforts to achieve immortality. These related techniques allowed a Sith Lord to move their consciousness from a dying or destroyed body into a new vessel, effectively achieving a form of eternal life. However, the process was extraordinarily difficult, requiring precise timing, prepared vessels, and often assistance from loyal followers to complete successfully. The basic principle involved separating consciousness from the physical body and projecting it into a new host. This required the Sith Lord to maintain their identity and willed during a state of existence without physical form, a state that many found disorienting or impossible to sustain. The target body needed to be alive, but incapable of resisting the possession, typically achieved through comas, drug-induced stupors, or cloned bodies specifically designed to lack independent will. Emperor Palpatine's use of essence transfer to survive his death at Endor demonstrates the technique's potential when properly prepared. Palpatine had created multiple clone bodies and stored them in secure facilities across the galaxy. When Darth Vader threw him down the Death Star's reactor shaft, Palpatine's spirit transferred into one of these prepared clones, allowing him to return decades later, as seen in The Rise of Skywalker. However, even Palpatine's mastery couldn't create perfect transfers. His clone bodies degraded rapidly, forcing him to cycle through multiple vessels as each deteriorated. The process of transferring repeatedly also took a spiritual toll, making each successive transfer more difficult and less complete. By the time of the sequel trilogy, Palpatine's form was severely damaged, kept functional only through Sith alchemy and technology working in concert. The cloning process itself, when used for essence transfer, required specific modifications. Standard clones wouldn't work as vessels because they developed their own consciousness and will. The clones needed to be mentally blank, lacking the neural development that would create an independent personality. This made them fragile and prone to degradation, as the very modifications that made them suitable vessels also compromised their biological stability. Darth Simus provided an earlier example of spirit preservation, though his technique differed from pure essence transfer. After losing a battle to Marka Ragnos and facing imminent death, Simus managed to preserve his living head inside a crystalline casing. He existed in this state for over 100 years, serving as an instructor to Naga Sadow and other Sith students. The technique kept him conscious and capable of communication, though trapped in his preserved state. This approach offered advantages and disadvantages compared to essence transfer. Simus retained his original body, avoiding the disorientation and risks of transferring consciousness. However, he was completely dependent on the crystalline container and couldn't interact with the physical world except through conversation. His existence demonstrated the Sith willingness to accept horrific states of being if it meant survival and continued influence. The dark baptism ritual served as an initiation ceremony in some Sith traditions, marking an apprentice's transformation from novice to true Sith. The specific details varied between different Sith orders and time periods, but common elements included demonstrations of power, formal rejection of previous allegiances, and physical or spiritual ordeals designed to test the initiate's commitment to the dark side. Some baptism rituals involved combat trials where the initiate had to defeat multiple opponents or particularly dangerous creatures. Others required the initiate to perform their first act of significant darkness, such as killing someone close to them or committing atrocities that would forever separate them from the possibility of redemption. The purpose wasn't merely to prove capability, but to psychologically mark the transformation, creating a clear before and after in the initiate's mind. The ritualistic death and ceremonial rebirth of Sith battle lords created bonds between the battle lord and their troops, as well as among the troops themselves. The precise nature of these bonds remained somewhat obscured even to modern scholars, but evidence suggests the Sith employed dark side techniques to create near-physical linkages among affected individuals. These bonds allowed for enhanced coordination, shared awareness, and potentially the ability to draw strength from fallen comrades. Creating these bonds required extensive ritual work conducted over multiple days or weeks. The Battle Lord would perform ceremonies that incorporated blood mixing, synchronized meditation, and exposure to shared traumatic experiences designed to forge group identity. The result was a military unit that functioned with superhuman coordination and loyalty, though at the cost of individual autonomy. Temples of Shadow Sith, temples and tombs scattered across the galaxy, served as more than mere buildings or burial sites. These structures functioned as repositories of dark side energy, their very architecture designed to channel and amplify the Force's darker aspects. Understanding these locations reveals how the Sith created permanent strongholds of power that persisted long after their builders' deaths. Perhaps the most ironic Sith site sits hidden beneath one of the Jedi Order's most sacred locations. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant, the heart of the Jedi Order for millennia, was built directly on top of an ancient Sith shrine. The Jedi believed this symbolized their triumph over the Sith, that by constructing their temple atop a Sith holy site, they were suppressing and conquering the dark side itself. This proved to be a catastrophic miscalculation. The Sith shrine's dark side energy persisted beneath the temple, subtly corrupting the location and making the Jedi's connection to the Force less clear. Emperor Palpatine, aware of the shrine's existence and location, used its power to cloud the Jedi's vision and hide his own dark side presence during his time as Supreme Chancellor. The very ground the Jedi walked on aided their destruction, the ancient Sith shrine accomplishing across centuries what no army could have achieved. The shrine's influence worked in ways both obvious and subtle. Jedi who spent extensive time meditating in the temple sometimes reported troubling visions or disturbing dreams, effects they attributed to stress or personal struggles when they were actually touching the shrine's darkness. The Force visions Jedi received while in the temple could be influenced or corrupted by the shrine's presence, potentially leading them toward harmful decisions while believing they followed the Force's guidance. When Palpatine finally revealed himself and ordered the Jedi Temple's destruction, the shrine beneath presumably remained intact, buried under rubble, but still emanating dark power. Later events in Star Wars continuity, including Luke Skywalker's brief visit to the ruined temple, confirmed that the location remained strongly aligned with the dark side, a permanent scar on Coruscant itself. The Sith temple on Malachor housed terrible secrets and a superweapon powered by a giant kyber crystal. When Ahsoka Tano, Kanan Jarrus, and Ezra Bridger visited this world during the events of Star Wars Rebels, they found massive stone columns inscribed with the Old Tongue. The temple itself was partially buried and damaged, suggesting ancient conflicts had partially destroyed it, but enough remained to pose serious dangers to the visitors. Inside the temple, the heroes discovered the superweapon, a device designed to target and kill all Force-sensitive beings within range. This was conceptually similar to the thought bomb, but implemented through technology enhanced by dark side rituals rather than pure Force technique. The weapon had been fired at some point in the distant past, presumably killing many Jedi and Sith who were fighting over control of Malachor. The temple's architecture demonstrated sophisticated understanding of dark side force principles. The structure channeled dark energy from the planet itself into focal points where rituals could be performed with amplified power. The chambers weren't randomly arranged but formed geometric patterns that created stand-in waves of dark side energy, making the entire temple function as a massive dark side artifact. The Valley of the Dark Lords on Korriban served as an expansive necropolis containing tombs of ancient Sith lords, including Ajunta Pall, Marka Ragnos, and Tulak Hord. Each tomb was unique, designed to reflect the occupant's personality and accomplishments, while also serving as a final test for any who would claim the Dark Lord's legacy. These weren't passive graves, but active challenges, filled with traps, guardians, and trials that only worthy Sith could overcome. Entering a tomb without proper preparation was often fatal. The tombs contained physical dangers like automated defenses and guardian creatures, but also spiritual threats. The preserved darkness of the tomb's occupant could attack intruders psychically, showing them terrible visions or overwhelming them with fear. Some tombs contain curses that would afflict anyone who disturbed them, causing illness, madness, or supernatural misfortune that persisted long after leaving the tomb. For Sith apprentices, visiting the tombs served as both education and trial. Successfully navigating a tomb proved the apprentice's strength and cunning, while also potentially granting them artifacts or knowledge left behind by the tomb's occupant. Failure typically meant death, though in some cases, failed tomb raiders would be transformed into guardian creatures themselves, their spirits enslaved to protect the very tomb they sought to plunder. Naga Sadow's tomb on Korriban was among the most elaborate, a massive burial site containing powerful artifacts and extensive dark-side secrets. The tomb's design incorporated Sith alchemy principles, creating chambers that existed partially in normal space and partially in dark-side dimensions. Navigating these chambers required force sensitivity and understanding of Sith philosophy, as the path forward wasn't always physically obvious. The temples of Yavin 4, built by Exar Kun's Massassi slaves, combined functional architecture with ritual significance. The temples weren't merely buildings, but massive alchemical constructs designed to focus and amplify Kun's power. The Great Temple that would later house the Rebel Alliance base served as the central node in a network of smaller temples spread across the moon, all connected through dark side energy channels that Kun could tap into from any location. The Massassi who constructed these temples performed blood sacrifices during key stages of construction, mixing their life essence into the mortar and foundations. This created buildings that were partially alive, infused with Massassi spirits that remained bound to the structures even after death. These trapped spirits sometimes manifested as apparitions or actively influenced events within the temples, acting according to programming laid down by Exar Kun millennia earlier. When Luke Skywalker established his Jedi Academy in the Great Temple, he was initially unaware of its dark history. The temple's corruption had gone dormant during the decades between the Empire's rise and the rebellion's use of the moon. But Luke's presence and that of his Force-sensitive students reactivated the ancient dark side programming. Exar Kun's spirit preserved within the temple system, attempted to corrupt Luke's students and return to power. This incident demonstrated a fundamental truth about Sith temples. They never truly become safe. The dark side energy embedded in their structure persists indefinitely, waiting for Force-sensitive individuals to arrive and reactivate dormant systems. Purifying such locations requires extraordinary effort and may be impossible in cases where the corruption has soaked into the very atomic structure of the materials. Closing thoughts. We've journeyed together through shadows that most never glimpse, exploring the hidden recesses of Sith history where obscure facts and forgotten truths wait patiently for those curious enough to seek them. From the biological peculiarities of the red-skinned Sith species to the intricate crystal matrices of their holocrons, from the terrible power of thought bombs to the corrupting influence of their ancient language, we've uncovered knowledge that exists in the margins of galactic history. These weren't the stories of Vader's redemption or Sidious's grand plan. These were the deeper truths, the technical details, and lesser-known figures that shaped the Sith Order across 5 millennia. We've learned how Sith alchemy could twist living beings into abominations, how their language itself carried corrupting power in its pronunciation, and how artifacts imbued with dark side energy could persist as threats for thousands of years after their creators' deaths. The forgotten Sith Lords we've encountered, from the immortal God King Darth Andedu to the Wither King Gol to the artistic destroyer Darth Momin, demonstrate that power and significance don't always translate to fame. These were Sith who changed the galaxy's course through their innovations or atrocities. Yet their names faded from common knowledge, remembered only by the most dedicated scholars and the most ambitious dark side apprentices seeking ancient wisdom. We've explored the terrible sophistication of Sith architecture, how temples and tombs served as more than mere buildings, but functioned as permanent channels for dark side energy. We've seen how even the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, built with the best intentions, was undermined by the ancient Sith shrine lurking beneath it, a reminder that darkness once established cannot be easily erased. The rituals and techniques we've discussed, from essence transfer to battle meditation to the creation of Sith spawn, reveal an order that approached the dark side with scientific rigor alongside mystical fervor. The Sith weren't merely evil, they were systematic in their evil, developing repeatable processes for achieving a power and preserving it across generations. As you drift toward sleep, consider the scope of what we've covered. This vast body of obscure knowledge represents just a fraction of Sith lore, the visible portion of an iceberg that extends far deeper. Countless other secrets remain buried in tombs on Korriban, encoded in holocrons hidden in forgotten temples, or lost entirely when their keepers died without passing them on. The Sith endure not because of their most famous members, but because of this accumulated knowledge, this body of dark side understanding built across millennia by countless practitioners. Each Sith Lord added to the legacy, and that legacy persisted through catastrophes that would have destroyed lesser organizations. From the collapse of the first Sith Empire to the thought bomb at Ruusan to Palpatine's apparent final death at Exegol, the Sith have been declared extinct repeatedly. Yet their knowledge survives in artifacts, in ruins, and in the dark corners of the Force itself. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into obscure Sith lore, I hope you'll like this video and subscribe to the channel. The galaxy contains countless stories beyond what the films show us, and there's always more to explore in the rich history that Star Wars has built over decades. Your suggestions for future topics are always welcome in the comments. What other hidden corners of Star Wars lore would you like to explore? What questions do the obscure facts we've discussed raise that deserve their own investigations? May your dreams be filled with visions of red-skinned warriors performing rituals beneath twin suns, of ancient holocrons waiting in darkness to share their terrible wisdom, and of temples whose stones remember the power that once flowed through them. May you sleep well, secure in the knowledge that the Sith's legacy lives on not in conquest, but in these fragments of preserved knowledge, waiting patiently for the curious to uncover them. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the shadows. Until next time, may the Force, in all its complexity, be with you.